Well, it's about that time. The NAR settlement changes are starting to impact our contracts and our deals. One of the things that we want to talk about is how do we make this as seamless as possible in dealing with the lender? Let me tell you a quick story. Had the first transaction that I've seen recently where the seller was offering comp of 2.5% to the transaction, and the buyer's agent, of course, had negotiated a full 3% comp from her buyer. She had the conversation with the buyer up front when they agreed to go under contract. Hey, here's what this means to you. The 0.5% difference is something that you'll pay me. And the buyers had agreed. They had actually made a joke about bartering for it. And so she distinctly remembers having that conversation. However, nobody told us about that agreement. All we get, of course, is the normal sales contract. We don't have normally access to your buyer's brokerage agreement or information from what comp the seller is offering. So we do our normal loan estimate, including all the normal loan fees and that type of thing. But when it comes time for the closing disclosure, well, now in working with the attorney, that additional comp was added to the loan. So I start getting questions from the buyer. Hey, your closing costs are higher than promised up front. Hey, this doesn't look right. Hey, what is this extra fee? So I reached out to the agent and I said, hey, chat with me about this. And she's like, oh, no, they're aware. This is not a surprise. We've discussed it in advance, and reminded me of the conversation they had where they talked about bartering some items. So again, we go back to the buyer and we're like, well, hey, no, remember, this is the additional comp that you would discuss with your agent. Again, he says he doesn't know what we're talking about and that our fees are too high. So I reached back out to the agent. I said, I really need you to call him. She did. They, rekindled memories of the conversation that they had had, and the buyer was then fine, and it closed swimmingly. However, all of this could have been avoided, or at least been a little more seamless, had we known that this was the cost of the transaction to the buyer at the very beginning. Here's your lesson. Anything that you're doing in the transaction financially, you need to keep the lender in the loop. If your brokerage has a marketing fee or some sort of transaction fee, like a flat fee of $500, you want to let the lender know that. Ideally, we put it on our original loan estimate. Then when we get the CD that compares the fees, everything's the same. And we're not drawing attention to something that we really don't want to have to be discussing all over again. The same will happen going forward. If the buyer is paying some of the fees, some of the commission, that we as the lender need to know that so we can account for it again on the loan estimate. Then the fees will match up with the closing disclosure. Here's your worst case situation. You don't involve the lender in that conversation. You get to the end and now there's these additional fees on the closing disclosure. Not only may you have an unhappy client who's like, whoa, what is this? Why are the numbers higher? But more importantly, the buyer may not even qualify. That would mean that we have not, vetted the buyer for that amount of cash needed at closing, right? These are additional funds that are needed to close the transaction, and we have to clear all those assets well in advance as part of the loan approval process. So do yourself a favor, make sure that anything financially, if you're doing a rebate of your commission or if you're collecting additional commission, if you have any flat fees, you're paying for a warranty, anything financially that you're involved, send in writing to the lender and keep a copy of it as soon as possible so that ideally we are communicating it to your client so that we can all stay on the same page as we work through this together. As always, we are here to help. We'd love to be your lender and assist your buyers in any way we can.